The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty construction site as Marcus Thompson wiped sweat from his brow. His massive hands, calloused from years of manual labor, gripped the steel beam with practiced ease. Despite his size, he moved with surprising grace, a gentleness that seemed at odds with his imposing frame. "Thompson, get your ass over here," shouted Rick Morrison, the site foreman, his voice cutting through the noise of machinery. Marcus set down his tools and jogged over, his heavy footsteps creating small clouds of dust. "What's up, Rick?" Rick's face was grim, avoiding eye contact. "Listen, Marcus, corporate's been on my back about cutting costs. With the economy and all," he trailed off, then looked up. "I gotta let you go, man. I'm sorry." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd seen this coming for weeks. The knowing looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when he walked by. "How long do I have?" "Today's your last day. HR's got your final check ready." Rick's voice softened. "You're a good worker, Marcus. Best I've had. But you know how it is." Marcus nodded slowly, his throat tight. "Yeah, I know how it is." 2 hours later, Marcus sat in his beat-up Ford pickup truck outside Sarah's apartment complex, staring at the final check in his hands. $8,507.22. After 5 years of faithful service, this was what remained of his career. He climbed the stairs to apartment 3B, his keys jingling nervously in his pocket. The door opened before he could knock. Sarah Winters stood in the doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing the blue dress he'd bought her for their anniversary. But her expression was cold, distant. "I heard about the job," she said without preamble. "Word travels fast." Marcus tried to smile, but it felt forced. "Look, Sarah, I know this looks bad, but I'll find something else. I always do." She stepped aside, letting him enter their shared apartment. The space felt different somehow. Smaller, more suffocating. "That's what you said last time, and the time before that." Sarah's voice carried a weary frustration. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore." His heart began to race. "Do what?" "This?" She gestured around the modest apartment, then at him. "Us. I can't keep pretending this is going somewhere." Marcus felt the familiar sting of inadequacy wash over him. "Sarah, please, we can work through this. I love you. I know you do." Her voice softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm. "But love isn't enough. My friends are getting married, buying houses, starting real lives. What do we have? A rented apartment and a pile of bills. We have each other." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do we? When's the last time we went out? When's the last time you did something, I don't know, adventurous? Exciting?" Marcus's mind raced, searching for an answer. "Remember when we went to that county fair? You said you wanted to try horseback riding, and I said maybe we could take lessons together. And what did you say when I actually looked into it?" Sarah's eyes flashed. "You said you were too big, too heavy, that the horses couldn't handle you." The memory stung because it was true. He'd called 3 different stables, and each had politely declined when he mentioned his weight. "That's different, Sarah. That's just practical." "No, Marcus. That's you giving up before you even try. It's you deciding you can't do something because of your size, and then using that as an excuse to not try anything else." Her voice cracked slightly. "I used to think your size made you strong, but all I see now is how it makes you afraid." The words cut deeper than any physical blow could have. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Sarah walked to the bedroom and returned with a suitcase. "I'm staying with my sister for a while. I need to think." "How long?" She paused at the door, not turning around. "I don't know. Maybe it's better if we don't see each other for a while." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Marcus alone in the sudden silence. He sank into the old couch, his weight causing the springs to protest. The apartment felt enormous and empty, filled with the echoes of dreams he'd been too afraid to chase. His phone buzzed, a text from his younger brother Tommy, 24. "Heard about the job. Sorry man, Mom's worried. She says come home for dinner Sunday." Marcus stared at the message without responding. Oh, the small town of Millbrook, 2 hours south, where everyone knew everyone's business, and his business had always been being the big Thompson boy, who was too gentle for his own good. He walked to the window and looked out at the city street below. People hurried past with purpose, heading toward their own dreams and destinations. A group of teenagers rode past on bicycles, laughing and carefree, and Marcus felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. His gaze drifted to the horizon, where the city gave way to rolling hills and open spaces. Somewhere out there, horses ran free in fields he'd only seen in pictures. Horses that had never been told they were too big, too small, too anything. Marcus pulled out his laptop and, almost without conscious thought, began searching. Horse riding lessons near me. Beginner horseback riding. Horse riding weight limits. Page after page of results, each with the same polite disclaimers about weight restrictions and safety requirements. 250 pounds maximum. 225 pounds preferred. Some didn't even list a number. Just consult with instructor regarding physical requirements. He was about to close the laptop when a small ad caught his eye. It was buried at the bottom of the page, barely visible. Whirlwind Ranch, where every dream deserves a chance. No limits, no judgments, just horses and hope. 45 miles south on Route 9. Open daily. Marcus clicked the link, but it led to an error page. He searched for Whirlwind Ranch, but found nothing current, just a few old newspaper clippings from the 1990s about a successful horse breeding operation. For reasons he couldn't explain, Marcus felt drawn to investigate. Maybe it was the loneliness, maybe it was Sarah's words echoing in his head, or maybe it was simply the fact that he had nowhere else to be. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. For the first time in months, he felt like he had a destination. The drive south took him through gradually changing scenery. The urban sprawl gave way to suburbs, then to farmland dotted with old barns and grazing cattle. Marcus had forgotten how peaceful the countryside could be, how the open sky made his problems seem smaller and more manageable. Route 9 was a 2-lane highway that curved through rolling hills covered in late autumn grass. At mile marker 23, he saw it, a weathered wooden sign barely visible through overgrown weeds, Whirlwind Ranch. An arrow pointed down a dirt road that disappeared into a grove of oak trees. Marcus turned, his truck bouncing over ruts and potholes that spoke of long neglect. The road opened into a clearing, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Before him lay the remains of what had once been a magnificent ranch. A large farmhouse sat at the center, its white paint peeling but its bones still strong. To the left stood a massive red barn, its doors hanging open like welcoming arms. Corrals and fencing stretched out behind the barn, creating a network of enclosures that spoke of better days. But it was what he saw in the far pasture that made his heart skip a beat. A horse stood silhouetted against the afternoon sky, its dark coat gleaming in the sunlight. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the animal's power and beauty. The horse's head was raised, alert and wild, watching Marcus with intelligent eyes. As if sensing his gaze, the horse suddenly reared up on its hind legs, pouring the air in a display of raw, untamed majesty. Then it dropped back down and galloped across the pasture, its hooves thundering against the earth in a rhythm that seemed to match Marcus's heartbeat. Marcus climbed out of his truck, mesmerized. He walked slowly toward the fence, not wanting to spook the animal, but unable to resist getting closer. The horse was a stallion, deep black with white markings on his face and legs. His mane flowed like liquid midnight as he ran, and his eyes held an intelligence and wildness that took Marcus's breath away. Beautiful, isn't he? Marcus spun around to find an elderly man standing behind him. Elias Wright, 72, was tall and lean, with silver hair and weathered hands that spoke of a lifetime working with animals. His eyes were kind but sharp, missing nothing. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quickly. "I saw the sign and I didn't know anyone was here. I can leave." No need to apologize. Not many folks find this place anymore. Elias extended his hand. Elias, right. I'm the caretaker here, more or less. Marcus Thompson. His handshake was firm but gentle. That horse, is he yours? Elias chuckled. A sound like wind through old trees. Thunder belongs to himself. Has for the past 3 years, ever since he showed up here. No one knows where he came from, but he's made this place his home. Thunder, Marcus repeated, watching the stallion who had stopped running and was now grazing peacefully, though his ears remained alert. Most beautiful horse I've ever seen, and the most stubborn, had a dozen trainers try to work with him. Best horseman in 3 counties couldn't get within 10 feet of him with a saddle. Elias studied Marcus with curious eyes. That brings you out here, son. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. I was looking for riding lessons. Saw an ad online, but it didn't have much information. Haven't given lessons in years. This place, Elias gestured around the neglected ranch, hasn't been the same since my daughter moved to the city. Can barely keep up with maintaining what's here. Marcus's disappointment was evident. I should probably go then. Now hold on. Didn't say I couldn't help you out. Elias's eyes twinkled. What's your experience with horses? None, Marcus admitted. Well, petting horses at petting zoos when I was a kid. But I've always wanted to learn. People say, he hesitated. People say what? That I'm too big, too heavy for most horses. Elias was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with the same intensity he'd seen the stallion use. You know what I think? Marcus shook his head. I think Thunder there has been waiting for someone just like you. As if summoned by his name, the black stallion lifted his head and looked directly at Marcus. For a moment that stretched into eternity, man and horse regarded each other across the pasture, and Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. A recognition, a calling, a possibility he'd never dared to imagine. But everyone says, Marcus began. Everyone says a lot of things, Elias interrupted gently. The question is, what do you say? Marcus looked back at Thunder, who had taken a few steps closer to the fence, close enough that Marcus could see the intelligence and spirit burning in his dark eyes. For the first time in his life, Marcus didn't hear the voices telling him what he couldn't do. Instead, he heard only the whisper of wind through grass, the distant call of birds, and something that might have been destiny calling his name. I say, Marcus said quietly, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice, I'd like to try. Fade out. The next morning arrived with a crisp autumn chill that made Marcus's breath visible as he drove back down the dirt road to Wild Wind Ranch. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying the moment when Thunder had looked at him with those intelligent eyes. Something about that gaze had awakened a part of him he'd kept buried under years of self-doubt and other people's limitations. Elias was already waiting by the fence when Marcus pulled up, a steaming cup of coffee in his weathered hands and a knowing smile on his face. Figured you'd be back, the old man said as Marcus approached. Saw it in your eyes yesterday. Same look Thunder had when he first showed up here, like he was home but didn't quite know it yet. Marcus felt his cheeks warm despite the cool air. I couldn't stop thinking about him. About what you said. And what did you conclude? Elias asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. That maybe it's time I stopped listening to everyone else and started listening to myself. The words surprised Marcus with their conviction. He'd never been one to make bold statements, but something about this place, about Thunder, made him feel different. Brave Thunder stood in the center of the pasture, his black coat gleaming in the morning sunlight. He was watching them, his ears pricked forward with interest, but maintaining his distance. He's been restless all morning, Elias observed. Kept looking toward the road, like he was expecting someone. You think he was waiting for me? Marcus asked, hardly daring to believe it. I think that horse has been waiting his whole life for someone who understands what it's like to be judged before being known. Elias set his coffee cup on a fence post and studied Marcus carefully. Before we go any further, I need to know something. Why horses? Why now? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching Thunder graze peacefully in the distance. When I was 8, my dad took me to a county fair. There was this beautiful brown mare giving pony rides to kids. I begged him to let me try, but the attendant took one look at me and said I was too big, that I'd hurt the horse. He paused. The memory's still painful after 20 years. My dad was embarrassed, said we should have known better. That night, I dreamed I was riding that horse across open fields, and she wasn't struggling or hurt. She was happy, running free with me on her back. Elias nodded slowly. And you've carried that dream ever since. Everyone's always told me what I can't do because of my size. Can't ride horses, can't run marathons, can't... Marcus's voice trailed off as he thought of Sarah's words. Can't be adventurous or exciting. But looking at Thunder yesterday, I realized something. He's big too, powerful. But nobody calls him too big to be wild and free. Thunder's got spirit, Elias agreed. More than most horses I've known. But spirit without trust is just wildness. The question is, are you ready to earn his trust? How do I do that? Same way you'd want someone to earn yours. With patience, respect, and by showing him who you really are, not who everyone says you are. Elias gestured toward the pasture. First lesson. Horses read energy, not appearances. They don't care if you weigh 150 pounds or 300. They care if you're confident, calm, and genuine. Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. What if he doesn't like me? What if he runs away? Then we'll try again tomorrow. And the next day, however long it takes. Elias opened the gate to the pasture. But first, you need to meet the other horses. Thunder's the star of this place, but he's not the only one here. They walked through the gate and Marcus felt his heart race as they entered Thunder's domain. The stallion lifted his head and watched their approach, but didn't move away. To their left, 3 other horses grazed peacefully. A gentle brown mare, a spotted gelding, and a grey pony. This is Daisy, Elias said, approaching the brown mare. She's 22 years old and has the patience of a saint, taught more beginners to ride than I can count. Daisy lifted her head and nuzzled Elias's hand affectionately. And this troublemaker is Patches, he continued, patting the spotted gelding. He's got personality to spare and loves attention almost as much as he loves apples. The grey pony trotted over, clearly not wanting to be left out. And our little Napoleon here is Stormy. Don't let his size fool you. He thinks he runs this place. Marcus reached out hesitantly to pet Daisy, and she allowed it, her soft nose investigating his unfamiliar scent. She's beautiful, he whispered, amazed by the warmth and gentleness of the large animal. They all are. Horses are prey animals, Elias explained as they stood among the small herd. They're naturally cautious around new things, but once they decide you're safe, they'll trust you with their lives. As if to demonstrate, Patches nudged Marcus's shoulder, looking for attention. Marcus laughed and scratched behind the horse's ears, surprised by how natural it felt. Now, Elias said quietly, turn around slowly and look at Thunder. Don't make direct eye contact yet, just acknowledge his presence. Marcus turned and felt his breath catch. Thunder had moved closer, much closer. The magnificent stallion stood only 30 feet away, his dark eyes fixed on Marcus with intense curiosity. Up close, Thunder was even more impressive than Marcus had imagined. He stood nearly 17 hands high, his muscular frame speaking of power and speed. His coat was deep black except for a white star on his forehead and white markings on his legs. His mane and tail flowed like silk in the morning breeze. He's magnificent, Marcus breathed. Now walk toward him, but stop if he takes a step back. Let him set the boundaries. Marcus moved slowly, his heart pounding. 25 feet. 20. Thunder's ears flicked forward and back, processing this large, gentle human who moved without aggression or fear. 15 feet. Thunder snorted softly, a sound that seemed more curious than alarmed. 10 feet. Marcus stopped, sensing that this was far enough for now. Thunder stretched his neck forward, his nostrils flaring as he caught Marcus's scent. For several long moments, man and horse regarded each other in silence. Then Thunder did something extraordinary. He took a step forward. "Easy, boy," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm not going to hurt you." Thunder took another step, then another, until his muzzle was only inches from Marcus's outstretched hand. The stallion's breath was warm against Marcus's palm as he investigated this strange new human, who smelled of honesty and carried himself without the sharp edge of fear or dominance that had characterized so many others. Finally, Thunder allowed his nose to touch Marcus's hand. The contact was electric, a connection that seemed to flow between them like understanding itself. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes as the magnificent animal accepted his touch. "Hello, Thunder," he whispered. Thunder's ears pricked forward, and Marcus could swear he saw recognition in those intelligent dark eyes. "That," Elias said softly from behind them, "is the most progress anyone's made with him in 3 years." Marcus didn't move, afraid to break the spell. Thunder seemed equally reluctant to step away, remaining close enough that Marcus could feel the warmth radiating from his powerful frame. "What happens now?" Marcus asked quietly. "Now you start building a relationship. Trust isn't built in a day, especially not with a horse like Thunder. But you've made a good beginning." Thunder finally stepped back, but he didn't go far. He moved to a nearby patch of grass and began grazing, but his attention remained partially focused on Marcus. "I want to learn everything," Marcus said, his voice filled with determination. "I want to learn how to care for him, how to understand him, how to ride him." Elias finished with a knowing smile. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. "That's a long road, son. Thunder's never had a saddle on his back, never had a bit in his mouth. He's wild in every sense of the word. But it's possible. With Thunder, anything's possible. But it'll take time, patience, and more courage than you might realize. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus looked at Thunder, who had lifted his head again and was watching their conversation with interest. The stallion's presence filled Marcus with a strange sense of purpose he'd never felt before. "I've got nowhere else to be," Marcus said simply, "and something tells me neither does he." Thunder snorted softly, as if in agreement, and Marcus felt his heart swell with hope. For the first time in his life, he was exactly where he belonged. The drive back to the city that afternoon felt different. Marcus found himself sitting straighter, breathing deep. His phone rang as he merged onto the highway. Sarah's ringtone. He let it go to voicemail, not ready to explain the transformation he felt happening inside him. When he finally listened to the message that evening, her voice sounded small and uncertain. "Marcus, I've been thinking about what I said. Maybe we could talk. I heard from your brother that you're not returning his calls. I'm worried about you. Call me back, okay?" But Marcus didn't call back. Instead, he spent the evening researching horses, reading everything he could find about building trust with wild animals, about the bond between humans and horses. He learned about horse psychology, about the importance of body language and energy. He discovered that some of the world's best horsemen had been considered unlikely candidates. Too old, too young, too inexperienced. But they all shared one thing: an unshakable belief in the possibility of connection. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Marcus's dreams were filled with visions of running across open fields, Thunder's powerful strides carrying them both toward a horizon that seemed limitless and full of promise. For the first time in months, he slept peacefully, and when morning came, he couldn't wait to return to the ranch. The phone calls from potential employers could wait. The bills could wait. Everything could wait. Thunder was calling, and Marcus finally had the courage to answer. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus first touched Thunder's muzzle, and the bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day. Marcus had fallen into a routine that felt more natural than anything he'd ever done. He arrived at Wild Wind Ranch every morning at sunrise, spent the day learning from Elias and working with the horses, and left only when darkness made it impossible to see. His savings were dwindling, but for the first time in his life, money seemed less important than purpose. Thunder had begun approaching the fence whenever Marcus arrived, nickering softly and greeting. The stallion would follow Marcus around the pasture, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly enjoying the human's presence. Elias watched their interactions with growing amazement, often shaking his head in disbelief. "In 30 years of working with horses, I've never seen anything like this," he told Marcus one afternoon, as they watched Thunder graze nearby. "That horse trusts you in a way he's never trusted another human being." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest at the words, trust. It was something he'd never experienced in quite this way. Thunder didn't care about his size, his unemployment, or his failed relationship. The stallion saw something in Marcus that Marcus was just beginning to see in himself. But not everyone was impressed with Marcus's newfound passion. His phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from family, friends, and potential employers. His mother had left increasingly worried voicemails, and his brother Tommy had driven out to the ranch twice, trying to convince Marcus to come back to reality. "This is insane, Marcus," Tommy had said during his last visit, gesturing around the neglected ranch. "You're living in a fantasy. You need to find a real job, get back with Sarah, and stop playing cowboy." Marcus had listened patiently, but Tommy's words bounced off him like rain off Thunder's coat. How could he explain that for the first time in his life, he felt truly alive? How could he make anyone understand that Thunder wasn't just a horse to him, but a mirror reflecting the person he was meant to be? The real test came on a grey Thursday morning when Marcus arrived to find a familiar car parked next to Elias's truck. Sarah's silver Honda sat gleaming in the morning light, looking as out of place at the rural ranch as a diamond in a haystack. Marcus's stomach dropped as he climbed out of his truck. He found Sarah standing by the pasture fence, her arms crossed, and her expression a mixture of frustration and concern. She wore expensive jeans and boots that had clearly never seen actual work. Her blonde hair styled perfectly despite the early hour. "Hello, Marcus," he said without turning around. "Sarah," his voice came out rougher than intended. "What are you doing here? Tommy told me where to find you." She finally turned to face him, and Marcus was surprised to see genuine worry in her eyes. "Marcus, what is this? What are you doing?" "I'm learning to work with horses. You're wasting your life." The bluntness of her statement hit him like a physical blow. "I've been patient. I've given you space, but this has gone too far. You haven't returned any of my calls, you're not looking for work, and now I find out you're spending every day at some rundown ranch, playing with animals." Thunder appeared at the fence as if summoned by the tension in Marcus's voice. The stallion's ears were pricked forward, his dark eyes assessing this new human with the sharp voice and aggressive energy. "That's him," Sarah said, following Marcus's gaze. "That's the horse you've been obsessing over. His name is Thunder. It's a horse, Marcus, a big, dangerous animal that you have no business being around." Sarah's voice rose with frustration. "Look at yourself. You've lost weight, you're tan from being outside all day, and you have this look in your eyes like you're living in some kind of dream world." It was true. Marcus had lost nearly 20 pounds from the physical work around the ranch. His hands were calloused from mucking stalls and mending fences, and his face had lost the pale, defeated look it had carried for months. "Maybe I am living in a dream," he said quietly, "but at least I'm finally living." Sarah stepped closer, her expression softening. "Marcus, I know I hurt you when I left. I know I said things that were cruel, but I was trying to push you to be better, to want more for yourself." "More of what?" "More of everything. A career, a future, a life that makes sense." She gestured around the ranch. "Not this. Not hiding away with horses, because the real world is too hard." Thunder snorted and pawed the ground, sensing the rising tension. Marcus reached out instinctively to calm him, and the stallion immediately quieted at his touch. Sarah watched the interaction with wide eyes. "See that?" Marcus said softly. "He trusts me. In 3 weeks, this horse that no one could get near has learned to trust me. He doesn't care that I'm big or unemployed, or that I've never done anything exciting. He just sees me. It's a horse, Marcus. It doesn't see anything." "You're wrong." The conviction in Marcus's voice surprised them both. Thunder sees everything that matters. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe people have stopped seeing what really matters. Elias appeared from the barn, leading Daisy toward the pasture. He nodded politely to Sarah, but didn't interrupt, sensing the importance of the conversation taking place. "I came here to ask you to come home," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "To try again. I've missed you, and I think we could make it work if you'd just stop this foolishness and—" "And what?" Marcus interrupted. "Go back to being the person who was too afraid to try anything. Go back to making excuses and living small." Thunder had moved closer to the fence, close enough that Marcus could feel his warm breath. The stallion's presence gave him strength. "Sarah, for the first time in my life, I'm not apologizing for who I am. I'm not making myself smaller to make other people comfortable. Thunder has taught me that." "A horse taught you?" Sarah's voice was incredulous. "Yes. He taught me that size isn't a limitation unless you let it be. He taught me that trust is earned, through consistency, not words. He taught me that sometimes the most beautiful relationships are the ones everyone else says are impossible." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, tears gathering in her eyes. "I don't understand you anymore." "Maybe you never did." The words came out gently, without malice. "Maybe neither of us understood me." Thunder stretched his neck toward Marcus, and without hesitation Marcus reached up to stroke the stallion's powerful jaw. The gesture was so natural, so full of mutual affection, that even Sarah could see the depth of the bond between them. "He's going to hurt you," she whispered. "Horses that size, that wild—" "Marcus, he could kill you without meaning to." "He could," Marcus agreed, "but he won't. Just like I could hurt him, but I won't. That's what trust is, Sarah. It's believing in someone even when you're vulnerable." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I can't watch you throw your life away for a fantasy. Then don't watch." The finality in Marcus's voice made her step back. "But don't ask me to go back to being someone I never wanted to be in the first place." She walked toward her car, then turned back one last time. "When this falls apart, when you get hurt or realize that dreams don't pay bills, don't call me. I won't be waiting anymore." Marcus watched her drive away, dust from her tires settling slowly in the morning air. He felt sad, but not devastated. The pain of her leaving couldn't touch the certainty he felt about his path. Thunder nickered softly and nuzzled Marcus's shoulder, offering comfort in the way only animals can. "She's not wrong about everything," Elias said quietly, approaching the fence. "Dreams don't pay bills, and thunder could hurt you if something went wrong." Marcus nodded. "I know, but Elias, what's the point of being safe if you're never really living?" The old man smiled, the same knowing expression he'd worn the first day Marcus arrived. "That, son, is exactly what I was hoping you'd figure out." Thunder snorted and tossed his head, as if agreeing with the conversation. Then he did something he'd never done before. He lowered his massive head and rested it against Marcus's chest, trusting his full weight to this gentle giant of a human who had shown him that size could be strength rather than something to fear. Standing there with Thunder's warm weight against him, Marcus realized that everything he'd lost, his job, his relationship, his old life, had been stripped away to make room for everything he was meant to gain. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting everything in golden light, and Marcus felt more certain of his path than he'd ever felt about anything. He was exactly where he belonged, with exactly who he was meant to be with. Thunder lifted his head and looked into Marcus's eyes, and in that gaze, Marcus saw his future stretching out before him, like an open field, vast and full of possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. The real journey was just beginning. 2 months after Sarah's visit, Marcus had become a fixture at Wildwind Ranch. His relationship with Thunder had deepened beyond anything Elias had thought possible. But they had reached a plateau. Thunder would approach Marcus, allow himself to be petted, and even follow him around the pasture, but the stallion had never allowed a halter on his head. much less a saddle on his back. Marcus had learned to read Thunder's moods, to understand his body language, and to communicate with him through touch and voice. But the dream of actually riding remained just that, a dream. Marcus's financial situation had become desperate. His savings were gone, his unemployment benefits had run out, and the stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen table grew thicker each day. He'd been living on peanut butter sandwiches and canned soup for weeks, spending what little money he had on gas to drive to the ranch. Elias had offered to pay him for the work he did around the property, but Marcus knew the old man was struggling financially too. The ranch was falling apart faster than they could repair it, and without income from lessons or boarding, there was barely enough money to keep the horses fed. The crisis came on a cold November morning when Marcus arrived to find Elias sitting on the porch steps, his head in his hands. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, immediately sensing something was terribly amiss. Elias looked up, his weathered face etched with defeat. "Got a call from my daughter last night. She's been trying to sell this place for months without telling me. Found a buyer who wants to tear down the buildings and develop the land." Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. "Sell it, but this is your home. This is Thunder's home. Can't afford to keep it anymore, son. Haven't been able to make the mortgage payments in 6 months. Bank's been patient because of my history with them. But patience only goes so far." Elias gestured toward the pasture where Thunder grazed peacefully, unaware that his world was about to change. "Developer wants all the animals gone within 30 days. Says they're a liability until the demolition begins. Where will Thunder go?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's what I've been trying to figure out all night. Daisy and the others, I can find homes for them. They're gentle, trained, easy to place. But Thunder," Elias shook his head sadly. "No rescue will take a stallion they can't handle. No stable wants a horse they can't ride. And he's too wild to be a pasture pet." The unspoken truth hung between them like a death sentence. If they couldn't find Thunder a home, the stallion would have to be put down. It was the reality of the horse world. There were too many horses and not enough people willing or able to care for the difficult ones. Marcus felt something break inside his chest. The idea of Thunder being destroyed because no one believed in him, because no one would take the time to understand him, was unbearable. "There has to be another way," Marcus said desperately. "What if I could prove he can be ridden? What if I could show people he's not dangerous?" Elias looked at him with sad, knowing eyes. "Marcus, you've done more with that horse than anyone thought possible. But there's a difference between getting a horse to trust you and actually training him to be ridden. Thunder's never had a saddle on his back, never had a bit in his mouth. The process could take years. And we don't have years. We have 30 days. Then we start now." The determination in Marcus's voice made Elias look up sharply. "Today, this morning, we start trying to get a halter on him. Son, that's not safe. You've built a beautiful relationship with Thunder, but the moment you try to put tack on him, everything changes. He could hurt you badly, and if I don't try, he dies." Marcus stood up, his mind made up. "Elias, I won't let that happen. I can't. Thunder saved me in a way I can't even explain. Now it's my turn to save him." For the next hour, Elias tried to talk Marcus out of his plan. He explained the dangers, the low probability of success, the fact that even professional trainers with decades of experience would be hesitant to take on a completely wild stallion. But Marcus's resolve only grew stronger with each argument. Finally, Elias went to the barn and returned with a soft rope halter and a lead rope. "If you're determined to do this, we'll do it right. But the moment I think you're in real danger, I'm ending the session." "Understood." Marcus nodded, though his hands were trembling as he took the halter. They approached the pasture where Thunder was grazing with the other horses. As always, Thunder lifted his head at Marcus's approach and walked over to greet him. But this time, Something was different. Thunder's ears flicked back and forth, and his nostrils flared as he caught the scent of the leather and rope. Horses have an instinctive fear of anything that might restrain them, and Thunder was no exception. "Easy boy," Marcus murmured, keeping the halter hidden behind his back. "It's just me, same as always." He spent several minutes simply petting Thunder and talking to him, trying to keep the stallion calm. But Thunder was too intelligent not to sense that something had changed. His eyes kept darting to Marcus's hidden hand, and his muscles were tense beneath his gleaming coat. Slowly, carefully, Marcus brought the halter into view. Thunder's reaction was immediate and explosive. The stallion reared up on his hind legs, his front hooves pawing the air dangerously close to Marcus's head. His scream of rage and fear echoed across the pasture, causing the other horses to scatter. "Get back," Elias shouted, but Marcus stood his ground. When Thunder came down, he spun and galloped to the far end of the pasture, his tail held high in alarm. "That's enough for today," Elias said firmly, but Marcus shook his head. "No, he's scared, but he's not running away. Look at him." It was true. Despite his dramatic reaction, Thunder had stopped at the far fence and was looking back at them. His sides were heaving with adrenaline, but his ears were pricked forward with curiosity, rather than flattened back in pure anger. "He wants to understand," Marcus said quietly. "He's afraid, but he trusts me enough to stay in the same field. That's something." They spent the rest of the morning simply being present in the pasture, with Marcus occasionally showing Thunder the halter from a distance. By afternoon, the stallion had worked up the courage to approach within 20 feet before shying away again. It was slow, frustrating work, but Marcus could see the conflict in Thunder's eyes, the war between his natural fear and his trust in this gentle human who had never hurt him. As the sun began to set, Thunder did something that took both men by surprise. He approached Marcus directly, stretching his neck out to sniff the halter with tentative curiosity. His whole body was trembling with nervous energy, but he didn't run. "Good boy," Marcus whispered, his own voice shaking with emotion. "I know it's scary, I know you don't understand, but I promise you, I will never hurt you." Thunder allowed Marcus to hold the halter near his face for nearly 10 seconds before his nerves got the better of him and he trotted away. But it was progress, and for Marcus it was hope. That night, Marcus drove home with his heart both soaring and breaking. They had made progress, but would it be enough? 30 days to transform a wild stallion into a rideable horse seemed impossible, even with the bond they shared. As he sat in his empty apartment surrounded by unpaid bills and the remnants of his old life, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. He picked up his phone and dialed his brother's number. "Tommy, it's Marcus. I need a favor, and I need you to not ask any questions." "Marcus, Jesus. I've been worried sick. Where have you been? I need to borrow money. $5,000. I'll pay you back, I promise, but I need it now." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Marcus, what's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble?" "I'm trying to save something important, someone important. I know how that sounds, but I'm asking you to trust me." Another pause. "This is about that horse, isn't it?" "Yes." Marcus's voice was steady. "This is about Thunder." Tommy sighed heavily. "Mom and Dad are going to kill me, but I'll transfer the money tomorrow. But Marcus, this is the last time. After this, you're on your own." "I understand. Thank you, Tommy. This means everything." After hanging up, Marcus sat in the darkness of his apartment and made a plan. $5,000 would buy him time, enough to pay his rent for 2 more months and keep gas in his truck. But more importantly, it might be enough to convince a few people to give Thunder a chance. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the ranch before dawn with a new sense of purpose. He found Elias in the barn, mixing feed for the horses. "I've got an idea," Marcus announced. "What if we could find Thunder a home before the 30 days are up? What if we could prove to someone that he's worth saving? Who's going to take a chance on a wild stallion?" Elias though there was a spark of hope in his eyes. Someone who believes in second chances. Someone who understands that the most broken things can become the most beautiful if you give them time and love. Marcus paused, watching thunder through the barn door. I'm going to call every rescue, every sanctuary, every horse lover in the state if I have to, and I'm going to tell them about Thunder. Not the wild, dangerous horse everyone thinks he is, but the intelligent, loving animal I know him to be. Elias smiled, the first real smile Marcus had seen from him in days. You know what, son? I think that might just work. And in the meantime, we keep working with him. Every day, every chance we get. Because even if we find him a home, he'll have a better life if he can trust humans enough to be handled. Thunder appeared in the doorway of the barn, as if he'd heard his name, his dark eyes moving between the two men. There was still weariness in his gaze, but there was something else too, hope, perhaps. Or maybe just the recognition that these humans were fighting for him in ways he couldn't fully understand, but somehow appreciated. The battle to save Thunder had begun, and Marcus was determined not to lose. The next 2 weeks became a blur of phone calls, rejections, and small victories. Marcus had contacted 43 horse rescues, sanctuaries, and private owners across 3 states. The responses were always the same. We don't have facilities for stallions. Wild horses are too dangerous. Have you considered gelding him? The suggestion to castrate Thunder made Marcus's stomach turn. It would make the stallion easier to handle, but it would also destroy the magnificent spirit that made Thunder who he was. Marcus couldn't bear the thought of taking that from him. Meanwhile, their training sessions had become a daily ritual of patience and progress. Thunder had grown comfortable with the halter being near him, had even allowed Marcus to touch it to his nose a few times, but putting it on remained impossible. Each attempt resulted in the same explosive reaction, rearing, spinning, and galloping away in terror. Elias watched these sessions with growing concern, not for Thunder's progress, but for Marcus's state of mind. The big man was pushing himself to exhaustion, arriving at the ranch sunrise and staying until well after dark. He'd lost more weight, and his eyes had taken on a desperate, haunted quality that worried the old horseman. You're going to burn yourself out, Elias warned on a particularly frustrating afternoon when Thunder had been especially skittish. This kind of training takes months, sometimes years. You can't force it. We don't have months, Marcus replied tersely, his hands shaking with fatigue and stress. We have 16 days, and if you collapse from exhaustion, we'll have 0 days. Elias's voice was firm but kind. Son, I know what Thunder means to you, but you're not thinking clearly anymore. Marcus wanted to argue, but deep down he knew Elias was right. His desperation was affecting his energy, and horses were sensitive to that kind of negative emotion. Thunder had been more nervous around him lately, feeding off Marcus's anxiety and fear. That evening, Marcus sat in his truck in the ranch parking area, too exhausted to drive home. His phone buzzed with yet another rejection email, this one from a sanctuary in Montana that had initially sounded promising. As he stared at the screen, tears of frustration finally came. He'd failed. Despite everything he'd sacrificed, despite the bond they'd built, he was going to lose Thunder. The sound of hoofbeats made him look up. Thunder was approaching the fence closest to the parking area, something he'd never done before. The stallion stopped just a few feet away and looked directly at Marcus through the truck window. There was something different in Thunder's eyes, not the usual weariness or curiosity, but something that looked almost like understanding. Marcus climbed out of the truck slowly, not wanting to spook the stallion. What is it, boy? What are you trying to tell me? Thunder stretched his neck toward Marcus, allowing the man to stroke his powerful jaw. As Marcus's hand made contact, he felt some of his desperation begin to ease. There was something magical about Thunder's presence, something that reminded Marcus why he'd started this journey in the first place. You know, don't you? Marcus whispered. You know we're running out of time. Thunder snorted softly and pressed his forehead against Marcus's chest, the same gesture of trust he'd shown months ago. But this time, it felt different. This time it felt like Thunder was offering comfort rather than just accepting it. They stood like that for several minutes, man and horse sharing a moment of perfect understanding. When Thunder finally stepped away, Marcus felt renewed. Not hopeful, exactly, but somehow stronger. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus arrived at the ranch to find a sleek black BMW parked next to Elias's truck. Standing by the pasture fence was a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed, in riding clothes that screamed expensive. Her silver hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in charge. "You must be Marcus," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Victoria Ashford. I believe we spoke on the phone last week." Marcus remembered the call. Victoria owned a large equestrian facility about 2 hours north, specializing in show horses and breeding. She'd been polite but firm in her rejection of Thunder, citing her policy against taking stallions with behavior issues. "Mrs. Ashford," Marcus said, confused. "I thought you weren't interested in Thunder." "I wasn't," she replied, her eyes scanning the pasture until they found the black stallion. "But my granddaughter overheard our phone conversation and hasn't stopped talking about him since. She insisted I come see this magic horse for myself." As if summoned by their conversation, Thunder lifted his head from grazing and looked toward them. Even from across the pasture, his presence was commanding. Victoria's breath caught audibly. "My God," she whispered. "He's magnificent." "He is," Marcus agreed, watching Thunder with the same awe he'd felt on that first day. "But he's also wild, untrained, and running out of time." "Tell me about him," Victoria said, her business-like demeanor softening. "Not the problems. I've heard plenty about those from other people I've called. Tell me who he is." For the next hour, Marcus told Thunder's story. He spoke of the stallion's intelligence, his capacity for trust, his gentle nature beneath the wild exterior. He described their daily interactions, the progress they'd made, and the setbacks they'd faced. Victoria listened intently, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just absorbing Marcus's obvious love for the animal. "Would you be willing to demonstrate your relationship with him?" she asked finally. Marcus nodded and opened the pasture gate. As always, Thunder approached readily, nickering in greeting and allowing Marcus to pet him freely. What happened next surprised everyone, including Marcus. Thunder, who had been so fearful of the halter for weeks, suddenly seemed calmer. Perhaps it was Marcus's renewed confidence, or maybe the stallion sensed that this visit was important. Whatever the reason, when Marcus slowly brought out the halter, Thunder didn't bolt. He snorted nervously and took a few steps back, but he didn't run. "Easy, boy," Marcus murmured, his voice steadier than it had been in days. "I know you're scared, but maybe it's time we both took a leap of faith." Marcus held the halter out, making no move to put it on Thunder, but simply letting the stallion investigate it. Thunder stretched his neck forward, his nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of leather and rope. His whole body was trembling, but he didn't flee. Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Thunder lowered his head slightly, just enough that Marcus could slip the halter over his nose. The stallion froze as the unfamiliar sensation of being restrained registered. Every muscle in his body tensed, and Marcus held his breath, waiting for the explosion he was sure would come. But Thunder stood perfectly still, trusting Marcus completely despite his obvious terror. "Incredible," Victoria breathed from outside the fence. "In 20 years of working with horses, I've never seen anything like that." Marcus's hands were shaking as he fastened the halter, speaking in a continuous stream of gentle reassurances. Thunder's eyes were wide with fear, but he remained motionless, putting absolute faith in the human who had never betrayed his trust. "Good boy," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're so brave, Thunder, so incredibly brave." They stood together for several minutes, Thunder adjusting to the feel of the halter, while Marcus stroked his neck and praised him. When Marcus finally began to remove the halter, Thunder actually seemed disappointed, nudging Marcus's hands, as if asking him to put it back on. Victoria was quiet for a long time after Marcus rejoined her outside the fence. Thunder had returned to grazing, but he stayed close to the fence, occasionally looking over at them with what seemed like pride in his accomplishment. "I've seen a lot of horse trainers work," Victoria said finally. "Professional trainers with decades of experience and walls full of ribbons and trophies, but I've never seen anything like what just happened." "Does that mean?" Marcus hardly dared to hope. "It means I'm willing to make you an offer," Victoria replied, "but it comes with conditions." Marcus felt his heart race. "What kind of conditions?" "Thunder would come to my facility, but you would come with him. As his trainer and handler. I'll provide housing, a salary and all the resources you need to continue his training." Marcus stared at her, in disbelief. "You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Thunder is obviously bonded to you in a way that can't be replicated. Separating you two would be cruel and counterproductive." Victoria's expression was serious. "My granddaughter Emma is 16 and has been riding since she was 4. She's talented, but she's also been battling some personal demons, typical teenage stuff, but serious enough that her parents are concerned. When I told her about Thunder, she said something that stuck with me. She said that maybe what she needed wasn't another perfect school horse, but a horse that understood what it was like to be misunderstood." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "You want Thunder to be her horse? I want to give both of them a chance to heal each other. But first, Thunder needs to be properly trained. That's where you come in." Victoria pulled a business card from her pocket. "Think about it tonight. If you're interested, call me tomorrow. I'll need an answer soon. I understand you're running out of time here." After Victoria left, Marcus sat on the porch steps where he'd found Elias in despair just weeks ago. But this time he wasn't despairing. He was overwhelmed with possibility. Thunder approached the fence and watched him quietly, as if sensing the importance of the moment. "What do you think, boy?" Marcus asked. "Ready for a new adventure?" Thunder snorted and tossed his head, his dark eyes bright with intelligence and trust. For the first time in weeks, Marcus allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to work out. The phone call he made that night would change both their lives forever. But in that moment, sitting under the stars with Thunder keeping him company, Marcus felt nothing but gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this point. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them together. Marcus called Victoria the next morning before sunrise, accepting her offer without hesitation. The relief in her voice was evident as she explained the logistics. Thunder would be transported to Ashford Equestrian Center within the week, and Marcus would move into the trainer's quarters on the property. There was just one condition Marcus hadn't expected. "I want to see Thunder under saddle before we make this arrangement permanent," Victoria said. "Emma arrives home from boarding school next weekend. I'd like her to see what he's capable of, and frankly I need to know he can be ridden safely before I trust him with my granddaughter." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Thunder had just accepted a halter for the first time. The idea of putting a saddle on him, let alone riding him, seemed impossible. "Mrs. Ashford, I appreciate your offer more than I can say, but Thunder has never been ridden. He's wild, and you have 6 days," Victoria interrupted gently but firmly. "I understand it's a lot to ask, but Emma has been through a difficult year. She was in a riding accident last spring that shattered her confidence. She's refused to get back on a horse since, despite being one of the most naturally gifted riders I've ever seen. When I told her about Thunder, something sparked in her eyes that I haven't seen in months. But if he can't be ridden, then he can't help her heal." The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a physical burden. Not only was Thunder's life hanging in the balance, but now a young girl's healing depended on what he could accomplish in less than a week. Elias found Marcus in the barn an hour later, staring at a dusty saddle hanging on the wall. "Heard you talking to Victoria on the phone," the old man said quietly. 6 days, Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. "Well then, Elias said, pulling the saddle down from its hook. We better get started. The next few days became a marathon of careful, patient training. They began by simply laying a saddle blanket across Thunder's back, which sent the stallion into a panic that took an hour to calm. But gradually, inch by inch, Thunder began to accept each new sensation. The blanket became familiar, then came the saddle itself, empty of stirrups, and each step was a negotiation between Marcus's gentle persistence and Thunder's natural fear of being trapped or controlled. Marcus barely slept during those 6 days, catching catnaps in the barn between training sessions. His hands became raw from handling the ropes and leather, and his voice grew hoarse from the constant stream of reassurance he offered Thunder. But something beautiful was happening. With each small victory, Thunder's trust in Marcus deepened. The stallion began to understand that these strange objects and sensations weren't meant to hurt him, but were part of a communication with the human who had never betrayed her brain. On the 4th day, Thunder allowed the full saddle to be placed on his back and cinched tight. He pranced nervously and tried to buck it off a few times, but he didn't panic. On the 5th day, Marcus was able to put weight in the stirrups, pressing down on Thunder's sides to simulate the pressure of a rider. And on the 6th day, the day Victoria was scheduled to return with Emma, Marcus faced the moment he'd been preparing for, but dreading. He would have to actually mount Thunder. Victoria arrived at noon in a pristine horse trailer, accompanied by a teenage girl who stayed close to her grandmother's side. Emma, Eshford, 16, was tall and slender like Victoria, with the same silver blonde hair and intelligent eyes. But where Victoria carried herself with confidence, Emma seemed fragile, uncertain, jumping at unexpected sounds and staying well away from the horses. "This is Emma," Victoria said, as they approached the pasture where Thunder stood, wearing his saddle, looking magnificent and slightly puzzled by the leather contraption on his back. "Emma, this is Marcus, and that's Thunder." Emma nodded shyly but didn't speak. Marcus could see the fear in her eyes when she looked at Thunder, but underneath it was something else, a longing that reminded him of his own first day at the ranch. "He's beautiful," Emma whispered finally, her voice barely audible. "But he's so big. Are you really going to ride him?" Marcus looked at Thunder, who was watching the newcomers with calm curiosity. The stallion had come so far in such a short time, but this final test would push both of them beyond anything they'd attempted before. "That's the plan," Marcus said, hoping his voice sounded more confident than he felt. "Would you like to see him up close first?" Emma shook her head quickly, stepping behind her grandmother. I can't, not yet." Victoria placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." Marcus spent the next hour letting Thunder adjust to having an audience, walking him around the corral with the saddle on, letting him grow accustomed to the creaking of leather and the jingle of stirrups. Emma watched from outside the fence, her hands gripping the rails so tightly her knuckles were white. Finally, there was nothing left to do but attempt what many would consider impossible. Marcus led Thunder to the mounting block Elias had constructed, his heart pounding so hard, was sure everyone could hear it. Thunder's ears flicked nervously, but he stood still, trusting the human who had brought him this far. "Easy boy," Marcus murmured, placing his foot in the stirrup. "We're going to do this together, okay? Just like everything else we've done." Thunder's muscles tensed as Marcus's weight settled into the stirrup, but he didn't move. Marcus paused there for a moment, half on and half off, giving Thunder time to process this new sensation. Then, in one smooth movement, he swung his leg over and settled into the saddle. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Thunder stood perfectly still, processing the strange sensation of carrying a human on his back. Marcus held his breath, waiting for the explosion he was certain would come. Instead, Thunder turned his head to look back at Marcus, as if to say, "Is this what we've been working toward?" It was a moment of perfect understanding between species, a testament to the trust they'd built over months of patient work. Then, Thunder took his first step forward with Marcus on his back. and Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears. They were actually doing it. He was riding Thunder. The stallion's gait was smooth and powerful, each step deliberate and controlled. They walked in a circle around the corral. Thunder's ears pricked forward with what seemed like pride in his accomplishment. Marcus leaned forward and stroked Thunder's neck, his voice thick with emotion. "Good boy," he whispered. "You're incredible, Thunder. Absolutely incredible." From outside the fence he could hear Victoria's sharp intake of breath and what sounded like Emma crying quietly. After a few minutes, Marcus dismounted, his legs shaking from adrenaline and emotion. Thunder nuzzled his shoulder, seeking the praise and affection he'd come to expect from his human partner. "I can't believe it," Victoria said, her voice filled with awe. "6 days ago he was completely wild, and now he's ready to help someone else heal," Marcus finished, looking meaningfully at Emma. The girl had tears streaming down her face, but for the first time since they'd arrived, she wasn't hiding behind her grandmother. "He trusts you," Emma said quietly, her voice filled with wonder. "Even though he was scared, he trusted you completely." "Trust is something you build one choice at a time," Marcus replied. "Thunder chose to trust me, and I chose to never let him down. It's the same choice we make with every relationship that matters." Emma stepped closer to the fence, her fear gradually being replaced by curiosity. Could I pet him? Just his nose?" Marcus led Thunder to the fence, and the stallion lowered his great head to Emma's level. With trembling hands, she reached out and touched his soft muzzle. Thunder stood perfectly still, as if sensing the fragility of this moment. "It is so gentle," Emma breathed, her face lighting up with the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. "I thought he'd be scary up close, but he's not. He's just beautiful." Victoria watched the interaction between her granddaughter and the stallion with tears in her eyes. This was what she'd hoped for, but hadn't dared to expect. "So," she said to Marcus, "when can you both move to the farm?" The arrangement was finalized that afternoon. Thunder would be transported to Ashford Equestrian Center the following week, and Marcus would begin his new life as the stallion's trainer and partner. As they prepared to leave, Emma lingered by Thunder's fence. "Will you teach me to ride him?" she asked Marcus quietly. "I mean someday, when I'm ready." Marcus looked at this brave girl, who was already beginning to heal in Thunder's presence. "When you're ready, Emma, Thunder and I will be here. But only when you're truly ready. There's no rushing." Emma nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of that promise. As Victoria's trailer disappeared down the dirt road, Marcus stood in the pasture with Thunder, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow they would begin a new chapter of their lives, but tonight was for reflecting on how far they'd both traveled from that first moment when a broken man had met a wild horse, and both had found exactly what they'd been searching for. Thunder nudged Marcus's shoulder gently, as if reminding him that whatever the future held, they would face it together. And for the first time since this incredible journey began, Marcus felt nothing but peace about the road ahead. They had found their purpose, their partnership, and their home. The rest was just the beginning of a beautiful adventure. 1 year later, Marcus stood at the rail of the pristine arena at Ashford Equestrian Center, watching Emma guide Thunder through a series of gentle exercises. The transformation in both girl and horse was nothing short of miraculous. Thunder moved with grace and confidence, his powerful frame responding to Emma's lightest touch. The wild stallion who had once feared human contact now carried the fragile teenager with the tenderness of a guardian angel. Emma had grown too, not just in skill, but in spirit. The shy, broken girl who had hidden behind her grandmother was now a confident young woman who spoke to Thunder in soft whispers and rode him as if they were dancing together. Her accident the year before had shattered more than her body. It had broken her trust in herself, in horses, in the very thing she'd loved most. But Thunder, with his own history of fear and healing, had understood her pain in a way no perfectly trained school horse ever could. "She's remarkable," Victoria said, joining Marcus at the rail. I haven't seen her this happy since before the accident. You've given me my granddaughter back. Marcus smiled, but his attention remained focused on the pair in the arena. Thunder gave her back to you. I just helped them find each other. It had taken Emma 3 months to work up the courage to sit on Thunder's back, and another 2 months before she was ready to actually ride him. But every small step had been worth the wait. Thunder seemed to sense Emma's fragility and adjusted his usually spirited nature to match her needs. With Marcus, the stallion was playful and energetic, eager for adventure. With Emma, he became gentle as a lamb, patient as a saint. The first time Emma had cantered on Thunder, tears streaming down her face, not from fear but from pure joy, Marcus had understood why he'd been brought to that abandoned ranch on that desperate day so long ago. This moment, this healing, this connection, this triumph over fear, this was what it had all been for. Marcus, Emma called from the center of the arena, bringing Thunder to a halt. Could we try the small jump today? I think I'm ready. Marcus looked into her eyes, searching for any trace of doubt or false bravado, but found only quiet determination. If you're sure you're ready, then Thunder's ready too, but only if you truly want to, not because you feel like you should. Emma nodded firmly. I want Thunder and we've come this far together. It's time for the next step. As Marcus set up a small crossrail in the center of the arena, his mind drifted back to that phone call he'd received just that morning. Sarah had called, her voice tentative and uncertain, asking if they could meet for coffee. She'd heard about his success with Thunder, about his new life at the equestrian center, and she wanted to see him again. I made a mistake, she'd said, her voice thick with regret. I let my fears make me cruel. I couldn't see past your size to who you really were, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Marcus had listened quietly, feeling oddly detached from the pain her words might once have caused. Sarah, I'm not angry with you anymore. You helped me realize I was living too small a life, even if that wasn't your intention. Could we try again? I know I don't deserve another chance, but I've changed. I see now what I was too blind to see before. There had been a time when those words would have meant everything to Marcus, when the possibility of Sarah's love and acceptance would have been worth any sacrifice. But sitting there in his comfortable cottage on the grounds of the equestrian center, surrounded by the life he'd built with Thunder, he'd realized something profound. Sarah, I hope you find happiness. I really do. But I've found mine. I've found where I belong and who I'm meant to be. I'm grateful for the pain you caused me, because without it I never would have found Thunder. And without Thunder I never would have found myself. The silence that followed had been long and heavy with understanding. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. He changed you, didn't he? That horse. We changed each other, Marcus had replied, simply. That's what real love does. Now, watching Emma position Thunder in front of the small jump, Marcus reflected on how profoundly true those words were. Love, real love, didn't diminish you to make others comfortable. It didn't ask you to be smaller, quieter, less than who you were meant to be. Real love saw your potential and helped you grow into it, even when that growth was scary and uncertain. Ready? Emma called, her voice steady and strong. Marcus nodded, his heart swelling with pride and anticipation. Emma asked Thunder to trot forward, and the stallion responded with perfect obedience. His ears were pricked forward, his steps light and confident. As they approached the jump, Marcus held his breath. This was more than just a small obstacle. It was Emma's declaration that she was ready to trust again, to risk again, to live fully again. Thunder gathered himself beneath Emma and lifted off the ground with effortless grace. For a moment, girl and horse were flying, suspended in perfect harmony above the rails. When they landed safely on the other side, Emma let out a whoop of pure joy that echoed through the arena. Thunder snorted and tossed his head, clearly pleased with their accomplishment. We did it, Emma cried, leaning forward to hug Thunder's neck. We actually did it. As she brought Thunder back to where Marcus stood, her face was radiant with happiness and accomplishment. "Thank you," she said to Marcus, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Thank you for believing in us, for never giving up on Thunder, for showing us both that being afraid doesn't mean you can't be brave." That evening Marcus sat in Thunder's stall as the stallion munched contentedly on his hay. This had become their nightly ritual, a quiet time together after the day's work was done, when they could simply be in each other's company without any agenda or goals. Thunder finished his hay and moved to stand beside Marcus, resting his great head against the man's shoulder with complete trust and affection. "You know what I realized today, boy?" Marcus said softly, scratching behind Thunder's ears. "All my life, people told me I was too big for things, too big to ride horses, too big to chase dreams, too big to fit into the life I wanted. But they were wrong. I wasn't too big, I was just in the wrong place, with the wrong people, trying to fit into a life that was too small for who I was meant to be." Thunder nickered softly as if in agreement. "You were never wild, Thunder. You were just waiting for someone who could see past your size and your fear to who you really were inside. We were both waiting, weren't we? Waiting for someone who would see us for who we could be, not who we were, afraid we were." Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a text message that had arrived that afternoon. It was from his brother Tommy. "Saw the article in the local paper about you and Thunder. Dad says he's proud of you, and Mom wants to know when she can come visit her famous son. We all knew you were meant for something special, Marcus. We just didn't know what it was until now." The article had been a surprise. A local journalist had heard about the unlikely partnership between the former construction worker and the wild stallion, and had written a piece about second chances and finding your true calling. The story had resonated with more people than Marcus had expected, and he'd received dozens of letters and emails from people sharing their own stories of transformation and unexpected paths to happiness. "Listen to this one," Marcus said to Thunder, opening one of the emails on his phone. "Dear Marcus and Thunder, I'm a 45-year-old woman who has always dreamed of learning to play piano, but everyone told me I was too old to start. After reading your story, I signed up for lessons. I'm terrible at it, but I've never been happier. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. With gratitude, Margaret." Thunder nudged Marcus's shoulder, as if reminding him to keep reading. "Here's another one. Marcus, I'm a 60-year-old man who gave up on art when my father told me it wasn't practical. I picked up a paintbrush for the first time in 30 years after reading about you and Thunder. I may never be good enough for a gallery, but I'm good enough for me. Thank you for the inspiration. Best wishes, Harold." The messages went on and on. People who had found the courage to pursue dreams they'd abandoned, to try things they'd been told they couldn't do, to risk failure in pursuit of something that made them feel alive. Each story was a testament to the power of believing in yourself, even when no one else does. As midnight approached, Marcus prepared to leave Thunder for the night, but the stallion seemed reluctant to let him go. Thunder followed him to the stall door and whinnied softly when Marcus began to walk away. "What is it, boy?" Marcus asked, turning back. Thunder stretched his neck toward the arena, then looked back at Marcus meaningfully. Despite the late hour, Marcus understood. "You want to go for a ride, don't you? Just you and me, under the stars." Thunder's enthusiastic snort confirmed his guess. Marcus saddled Thunder quickly, and soon they were walking out of the barn into the cool night air. The arena was empty and peaceful, lit only by moonlight and the soft glow of the security lights around the property. Marcus mounted Thunder and felt the familiar thrill of connection as the stallion moved beneath him. But instead of staying in the arena, Thunder headed toward the gate that led to the trails winding through the wooded hills surrounding the property. "All right, boy," Marcus said, opening the gate. "Let's see where the night takes us." They rode in comfortable silence through the moonlit forest, following familiar trails that led to Marcus's favorite spot, a clearing at the top of a hill that overlooked the entire valley. When they reached the summit, Marcus dismounted and stood beside Thunder, both of them gazing out over the peaceful landscape spread below them. The lights of the nearby town twinkled like stars in the distance, and the moon cast everything in silver and shadow. It was breathtakingly beautiful, but more than that, it felt like home, in a way nowhere else ever had. "So, you know what the best part is, Thunder," Marcus said, his voice filled with contentment. "All those people who said I was too big to ride horses. They were right about one thing. I am big, but they were wrong about what that meant. Being big doesn't mean I can't do things. It means I can do bigger things than I ever imagined. And you, my friend, you're not wild, you're free. There's a difference between being wild because you're afraid and being free because you choose to trust." Thunder turned to look at Marcus, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. In that gaze, Marcus saw everything they'd been through together. The fear, the doubt, the small victories, and the ultimate triumph of two souls who had found each other when they needed it most. "We saved each other, didn't we?" Marcus whispered, stroking Thunder's neck. "You saved me from living small, and I saved you from being alone. We both learned that the things that make us different aren't weaknesses. They're exactly what make us perfect for each other." As they stood together on that hilltop, Marcus felt a profound sense of completion. His journey from that desperate, defeated man who had lost his job and his love to this confident, purposeful person who had found his calling had been painful and uncertain, but every step had led him exactly where he needed to be. Thunder nudged him gently, and Marcus knew it was time to head home. As they rode back through the moonlit forest, Marcus realized that the word home no longer meant a place. It meant this partnership, this purpose, this peace that came from being exactly who you were meant to be with. Exactly who you were meant to be with. When they reached the barn, Marcus unsaddled Thunder and gave him an extra helping of grain as a thank you for the perfect evening. As he prepared to leave, Thunder once again rested his great head against Marcus's chest, and Marcus wrapped his arms around the stallion's powerful neck in a hug that conveyed everything words couldn't express. "Sweet dreams, my friend," Marcus whispered. "Tomorrow we help Emma get ready for her first show. Think she's ready?" Thunder's contented sigh suggested he had complete faith in the girl they'd both come to love, just as she had faith in them. Walking back to his cottage, Marcus pulled out his phone and looked at Sarah's contact information one more time. Then, with a sense of closure and forgiveness, he deleted her number. That chapter of his life was complete, and there was no need to keep the door open to the past when the future held so much promise. Inside his cottage, Marcus found a letter that had been slipped under his door while he was out riding. The return address made him smile. It was from Elias. "Dear Marcus," the letter began, "I hope this finds you and Thunder well and happy. I'm writing from my daughter's house in California, where I'm enjoying my retirement and spoiling my grandchildren. The ranch sold last month, and while it made me sad to see it go, I'm comforted knowing it served its purpose. It brought you and Thunder together, and sometimes that's all a place needs to do. Shelter love until it's strong enough to flourish anywhere. I think about you both often, and I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. You've proven that the most beautiful partnerships are often the ones no one expects to work. Take care of each other, and know that an old horseman is rooting for you both. With love and admiration, Elias." I've enclosed something I thought you should have. Inside the envelope was a faded photograph of Wild Wind Ranch in its heyday, with horses grazing peacefully in green pastures and the buildings fresh and well-maintained. On the back, in Elias's careful handwriting, were the words, "Where dreams come to grow." Marcus set the photograph on his dresser, next to a picture of Thunder and Emma, after their first successful jump. Two images, representing the before and after of a journey that had changed all their lives. As he prepared for bed, Marcus reflected on the incredible truth that sometimes the most important journeys begin not when you know where you're going, but when you're brave enough to admit you're lost. His phone buzzed one final time with a text from Emma. Thank you for today. Thunder and I couldn't have done it without you. See you tomorrow for more adventures. P.S. Grandmother says she's never seen me this happy. We both know it's because of you and Thunder. Sleep well." Marcus smiled, turned off the light and drifted off to sleep, with the sound of Thunder's contented whickering drifting through his window from the barn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students to teach, new horses to help, and new ways to prove that the things that make you different are exactly what make you extraordinary. But tonight was perfect, just as it was. A man and his horse, both finally home, both finally free, both finally exactly who they were always meant to be. In his dreams, Marcus rode Thunder across endless fields under an infinite sky, and they were both flying.